I call the meeting to order. Public Hospital District Number 4, King County Board of Commissioners. This is our work study session, Wednesday, May 29, 2019, 6:30 p.m. It was rescheduled from Wednesday, May 22nd, 2019, here at the Snoqualmie Valley Hospital North-South Conference Room, Snoqualmie, Washington. Let's all stand for the flag salute, please.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Oh, and she's too bad David is not here. I'm sorry, Commissioner Spider is not here to witness the swearing-in. Our first on the agenda is swearing-in ceremony for our newly appointed Commissioner, Jan Carter. Commissioner Jan Carter.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman and board members and public. Could I have Jennifer Lynn Carter please come forward? Ms. Carter, it's a distinct honor and privilege on behalf of the district and its members to swear you in. This is the oath of office as a duly appointed office of Commissioner for Public Hospital District Number 4, position number 5. I'm going to ask you to please raise your right hand and swear after me. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington and all local ordinances, and that I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge the duties of the office of Public Hospital District Number 4, Commissioner, position number 5, according to the law and the best of my ability? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll have you sign this. You'll take this with you.
Okay.
This is your oath of office, and I will sign one more, and we will notarize it for the official record.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Legal Counsel.
And you are most welcome, Madam Vice Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, guys. Thanks for coming in.
Okay, may we have the roll call, please? Madam Clerk?
President Norris.
Excuse?
Thank you.
Okay.
Vice President Herron.
Here.
Secretary Spikers.
On the way.
Commissioner Carter.
Present.
And Commissioner Pollard.
Here.
Sorry.
Okay, is there an approval of agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Approval of the agenda.
Second? Oh. Any?
I have Commissioner Pollard is moving. Sorry.
Oh, I second.
Okay, thank you.
Good. All right. Topics of discussion for this evening. The first is the quality update. Executive CEO, Dr. Whitcup.
All right, let me get it up here. Yeah, I turned them up for that, now I need them back down. Is this it? All right. So this is a lot of detail, and so just let me walk you through it. We're not going to actually look down at this great depth. But this is the Partnership for Patients survey. So this is the WSHA, Washington State Hospital Association. And so I don't know if you know this or not, but over the last year, they have expanded. And so it's not only Washington, but now it's also Alaska, and Oregon is in the process of joining as well. So the number of hospitals across the bottom here has gotten tremendously large. And what they've done is divided it into groups. So this left-hand group here are critical access hospitals. The middle group then is hospitals with 25 to 100 beds, 100 to 250 beds, and 250 and more beds. So that helps you to position where we are. So this is us, and then we are and then we're highlighted on every page. Our measure is. So again, I think you'll find that this will get easier as we go through. But this is starting with the catheter-associated urinary tract infections. And what this is, and you don't have a handout on this, this is actually just too detailed to print out and have it make any sense for you. So it's almost easier to show you and walk through it with you. And we will not spend this much time on every page, I'm just orienting you to the display because it duplicates on every one. So again, this is a rolling 12-month average, so this is the 12 months that transpires between the fourth quarter of 2017 and the third quarter of 2018, so it's already 6 months old. So some aspects of it are 18 months old, but this is as quickly as WSHA gets it out to us for this. So on this page is the measure of what's happened in these 12 months that are displayed here. And so this is our CAUTI rate. We are the second highest in the state as far as rates are concerned. And I'm not holding back to say that because I want to show you what's underneath it. It's not bad. It's because it's displayed as a rate calculation that makes it hard to compare. But you have to do it as a rate so you can compare one hospital to another.
Who's in first place there?
You mean the highest rate?
Yes.
So we have to do to get it there.
Yeah.
It's Wrangell,
It's,
Wrangell Medical Center, which is in Alaska.
Well, thank you.
So when I blow it up this big, you can see here where we are. Let's move on to this next page, because this is what's more important in my estimation, because this now is our trends. So what you saw before was just the snapshot of that 12-month period of time. But so for those of you, the two of you that have been listening to this quarter after quarter, you know that this is something that we have been working on. We've been working on bringing our CAUTI rates down. Ignore what's over here on the left-hand side. There are zeros listed, and they just, I don't know why they displayed it this way, because we didn't start collecting the measures until here for a starting point. But you'll see that our rate of CAUTIs was up high. This is rate. This is the same thing that was on the slide deck before. So rates of CAUTIs high, and then you see we've really started to work on it and slowly bringing that number down. What's on display down here is a quarter by quarter display of the absolute number of catheter-associated urinary tract infections each of those quarters. So again, you'll see high numbers here now going down to low numbers.
Does that high number start from the beginning of the first 12 months?
You mean right
The
here?
24, the rate? No, I'm going back to the top.
Right here?
Yeah,
Um,
and then going down and
yes, so
increasing.
that month, that 24 correlates to the 7.
Oh, I
The-
see. Okay.
The rate, you'll see here on the side, this is the number of infections that you had per catheter day. So let
Or
me,
1,000.
for 1,000 catheter
Days.
days, that's exactly right. So I'm just gonna flip us just real quick to another display.
This only applies to inpatients, is
This
that
only
correct?
applies to inpatients, that's correct. This is a different way of looking at the same information, but it drills down to some of the details. So here in 2016, the CAUTI rate was 22.8. So again, Emma, you were just drawing attention to that 24. So that's
Right.
kind of that same, now you visually know where it was on that graph. And then in 2017, we were kind of barely making a dent in it. It was in the early 2018 that we started making some very aggressive attempts at contending with this. And our contention occurred in two places. It occurred, one, in we decreased the number of catheter days. We really worked hard to get catheters out of people as often as we could. And then multitude of other interventions just to decrease the number of infections. And so now you can see each quarter of 2018, how this rate now is down in a much more reasonable number. I didn't say it's good, but it's a much more reasonable number.
It drove from 3.6 to the second quarter of 2018 to up to 11 again. That's
So Math, look, here, thank you for pointing that out,
Yeah.
math.
Okay.
So look at this, in the first quarter, we had 1 infection, in the second quarter, we had 2 infections.
Oh,
So that's not bad, but look what happened, we were
yeah.
extra successful in getting people out of their catheters, and now the math works against us. So, you know, so we're successful, we're doing the right things, just the math doesn't display it or demonstrate it without bringing the other details into the conversation.
It's almost like a washer.
In a way, and, you know, you have to deal with both.
Yeah.
So we need to get the catheter days down, we need to get our infections down. The only way we compare ourselves to other people is through the rate.
What's the principal technique that you use to get the infection rate down, for example?
The number of infections down, it is a multifaceted approach. So it is a combination of how you manage the catheter bag, how you put the catheter in, how you maintain the catheter, your collection techniques when you're grabbing samples, using appropriate timings for collection of samples. So it is a multitude of things that play into this. So, and I'm revisiting things that we've talked about before because I want you to stay abreast of the changes because we haven't dropped it. You know, we continue to work down. So even though these numbers, these absolute numbers are much better, and these absolute number of catheter days are much better, we'd still like to get more zeros than ones on our months. We know that our catheter days, the patients that come to us are often, whatever it is going on with them is what's getting, we can't change that. We can't change that, we can't get the catheters out. So right here's where we really can make our difference. So, again, we've done a great job in cutting it really in half, if not a little more than in half. Still going. Questions before I flip?
Is the rate that we're
Yeah.
using, is it a community rating? Is it a standard rating through all?
No,
Or is
this,
this just our rating?
this rate here is a mathematical relationship
I see.
of the number of infections per the number of catheter days. Yeah, times 1,000.
It's great that you only had 2 infections in quarter 1 of this year because it looks like the number of days really jumped up. Do you have an explanation for why I think that went up?
That has to do with the variety of patients that we have come in. You know, as soon as you have
There are
2 or 3
100
patients with
different,
MS and
Oh,
and
sorry.
they have an indwelling catheter, so the whole time we're here, they've got a catheter. You know, your days will just shoot up.
there are probably 100 or 500 different catheters available. Does the selection of the catheter, is that a factor in the infection rate or any of the other measurements?
Yes, it is. So you always want to be considerate of whether you're using a latex or a non-latex catheter, because so many people are sensitive to latex that if you have a skin reaction going on, you're going to increase the risk of an infection. So we are a latex-free facility, so we don't use latex catheters. Sizing is important, and so again, all of our nurses are competency verifying on selection of the correct size catheter, because too large or too small, both are compromising to these measures.
Thank you.
In my medical mission, that's one of the most common error made, is the use of catheter. That's why, so the infections are higher.
So it's just that one slide to show you, so you'll not deter. So now to move on. These are central line associated bloodstream infections. Again, this is the same thing, it's a rate measurement, so it's the number of infections per the number of catheter days that you have. This is just catheters in a blood vessel instead of a bladder. And just, again, we're part of the left-hand group, the critical access hospital group. Unlike most critical access hospitals, we have patients with central lines. Most critical access hospitals don't have patients with central lines because because we have the longer-term patients with a higher acuity of illness, that they have central lines. It's associated with our patient type. It's okay. And so here is our own history. You saw the comparison to others before. This is our own history. So you see when we have a bloodstream infection, on the occasional time that we have them, just one at a time. We did have 2 patients in this quarter that had a bloodstream infection. Because it's so unusual for us to have them, and especially when we have 2, this prompted the entire nursing staff going through a refresher training in maintenance. Not that we found a problem, but we felt like it was the right thing to do. Clostridium difficile infection rates, comparisons. So again, we're in the left-hand group. You see where we land, kind of in the middle, maybe the upper 2/3. And then now you see what our trend rates are overall. Lots and lots of quarters with 0 occurrences. This high number here back in 2015, that's just when we moved into this facility, and we learned that we right away were able to see that it was the change in muscle memory, meaning going from muscle memory to no muscle memory in the new facility. And so our staff were having to think through every step that they did. So very quickly we put some prompts in place for them to get those muscle memories back about some different hand cleaning techniques that are necessary in your patients who are at high risk for C. diff. And then we didn't have any again until since we moved into this building, we've just had these 5 episodes. And these are patients who develop C. diff in our facility. We actually care for a significant number of patients with C. diff because they come to us with it. They actually developed it at another facility. They came in here with it. But these are the only 5 that developed it in our facility, which is a real testimony to our staff's adherence now to the good techniques, because it is so transmissible from one patient to the next.
Is there any way to measure this as they come into the hospital so we can get credit for the fact that they didn't develop it in the hospital?
There actually is a process for doing that in the definition. So if you diagnose it in the first 2 days of them being here, then it gets credited to where they came from.
Good.
Yeah, that's the case for any infection when a patient transfers between facilities. Yeah. This measure is patients with falls and injury. So they fell in our facility and they had an injury as a result of the fall. And now you can see where we are, way over on the left-hand side of the group. And again, I'm really always impressed and appreciate when I see this, because our patient population is at such a high risk of falling. And so this again is testimony to the care and the attentiveness that our staff have in being really attentive to the risks of falls. Many of our patients have a little star on somewhere in their room or in their doorway, and a falling star means they're at risk for falls.
And that's preventative measure to decrease that.
There's chair alarms, there's bed alarms, there's rounding frequently, so every 2-hour rounds or more often. Somebody who's really impulsive, we'll actually put a sitter with them if we have to. The rounding every 2 hours is not just to check in on them if we know they're a fall risk. It's also to check in on the things that we know will contribute to a fall, like, do you need to go to the bathroom? Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable and warm? And are you hungry? So those are the things that get checked on regularly. Yeah, and if they're there, you don't put them off. You deal with either of those problems right away.
What about those who are having difficulty and they're really volatile? Is there a restraint?
You mean impulsive?
Impulsive, and they don't, what's some of the measures that We do, besides restraint or anything
No,
like that.
you can't restrain.
Yeah.
You know that.
I know that. That's what I'm, 'cause some other facilities may, you know,
In the
because
state of,
they've lost every
in
measures they
the,
could
yeah,
think
in the
of.
state of
So I wanna just
Washington,
make
yeah,
sure
in the
that-
state of Washington, you cannot
That is,
restrain.
of course.
Yeah, you cannot restrain, so
If
you
there's a
can,
volatile patient, what do you do? What do we do?
so you, that's the one-to-one sitter.
One to consider.
Yeah, that's the one-to-one sitter. Now, if somebody is volatile, meaning aggressive, and
Aggressive,
dangerous,
doesn't want to listen to
yeah,
whatever.
that becomes a patient who we might consider for transition to a geropsych unit.
Okay.
To a
that's
what?
good.
Geropsych,
Neuropsych clinic.
a hospital, a
That it has a
psychiatric
geopsych
hospital.
unit?
Mhm.
We can do that, huh?
Okay, great, thank
Yes,
you.
yeah, you can
Oh,
transfer.
Yeah, if there is that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Often that's the right place for them to get control of
Yeah.
whatever's going on in their behavioral health.
When you
For their
say fall
safety.
risk, actually, everybody's at fall risk, including the staff. So what you're really talking about is high fall risk.
Right.
And do you ever use a device like the one I wear, where it's, when I fall, it's answered?
Yeah, that's that longer.
Have you ever
No.
considered using these devices? Like, this
No.
comes from Philips.
Right, no, not in the hospital, because there's somebody within sound hearing distance at all times, and that's, we use bed alarms and chair alarms instead. Trends of our falls, and again, these are falls with injury. So they, and an injury is any minor injury, so if they fall and get a laceration, if they fall and, closed head injury, if their clothes fall and break a rib, any of those, it does not have to be dramatic bleeding that counts, so. So you can see we have months that are low and months that are higher. Things like this month, this quarter, I can tell you that was, 3 of these 5 falls was the same patient. So, sitter was assigned.
That was back in 2017.
Yeah.
So it's getting better.
Yeah. Absolutely. Not even getting better, this is just kind of, this is where we tend to live. You see down here, this was unusual.
Yeah, look at from 1 then up to 5, that's quite a lot.
Just when you're working with the small numbers, then just one patient can really change your numbers a lot.
On the basis of a fall, are the people perhaps referred to rehab for some strengthening exercises or anything like that? Is there any follow-up to a fall like that?
They're here for rehab.
Rehab, right?
Yes.
They're
So
here for rehab, so that's part of what,
that's part of it.
that's part of what is
Okay.
happening, yesterday, today, and tomorrow for them. And so, as part of their discharge plan, that's not really influenced by whether they fell here or not, as much as just how capable are they, what's their risk of falling when they go home.
Right.
And then hospital-acquired pressure injuries, so this is skin breakdown, either on the heels or on the buttocks or the tailbone. Those are the most common places, but this measure captures any type of pressure ulcer. So in some facilities, the back of the head is another place that it happens. So we're so thrilled that we're right here in this group. So none in this 12-month period of time. That is not to say it never happens for us, but in this 12-month period of time, it did not. And this is a measure that at a state level just got started in mid-2017, and this is an effort to decrease the radiation exposure to children, so anyone less than, I think they say 17 or 18 years old is the age. So trying to avoid head CTs for them in the first place, but if you have to do a head CT, getting the amount of radiation exposure down as low as possible. So low is better on this measure. Low is better, and so you see here where we are right now. Or I'm sorry, not right now, in this 12-month interval of time, we're actually even lower now. And then there's our trend. And that trend has continued downward. In fact, we just had a CT survey. Department of Health came around and did our CT survey, and were astounded at how low we've gotten it down, and said, wondered, were we not getting complaints from our radiologists that they weren't able to see images adequately? And so we said, no, we've actually done this with them. This has been a combined effort. They remain very satisfied with what they're seeing. So I'll be anxious to see this a year, the next 12 months, to see what it's looking like.
So this is from a permanently installed CT. It had nothing to do with the trailer or anything of that sort?
The trailer houses an MRI.
Okay, I got you. So the CT's permanently installed in the building. Thank you.
And this is not about the device, it's about the settings on the device, the settings that are chosen for the device. So this is people influence this. And this is measurement of our diabetics, and this is the only measure, all the measures we looked at so far were inpatients except the CT scan. Those were mostly ER patients. And now this is a measure of what's happening in our clinics. And this is of diabetics. And this is a measure of, called a hemoglobin A1C, and it's a measure of how good is the blood sugar being controlled. High is bad. So greater than 9% is the cutoff. Of over 9% is the bad category, and less than 8% is good. So this
So
is
that's less than 8%.
less than 8% is good on the test. The test results.
On the test results, yeah.
So this is a measure of what percent of our patients were greater than 9% on their test measure. And you'll see we're down here, less than 10% of our patients were poorly controlled with their diabetes. So that's really good, especially look at what's going on over here. We're not throwing stones, we're just happy we're over here.
How many endocrinologists do we have in staff?
We have 0 endocrinologists. That's a
Oh,
great question. We have 0 endocrinologists. All that work is being done by our primary care docs. That is,
I have a doctor, Chinese, I think he was he's a gastroenterologist, never mind.
yeah,
Sorry.
different part,
Right.
different system.
So we don't have one?
We do not.
Oh, we do not?
And then this is a trend of our diabetics over time. So you see we tend to run down here in these low numbers. This is influenza rate of our staff as we report it to the state. So we've not reported this year's. They haven't reported that out yet. This year's number will be up here. I think it'll 97 or 98% was our number. But climb. Here is where we implemented mandatory immunization. Yeah, back here we still allowed it to be a choice between masking or vaccine, and here we transitioned to it being a requirement.
If it's mandatory, why is it less than 100?
Because what's being measured is our documentation of it, and we realize when we start pulling the documentation that we don't have it, and so we're transparent, say we don't have it. So that's we spent these 2 years not only continuing to change the culture for mandatory, but also to work on our documentation to where it's always findable. So this year, like I said, it'll be in the 97, 98%, and that's because we did have a couple of staff members who were given, for the word, they weren't required to do it because they had a justifiable
Exemption,
reason. Thank you very much. They had an exemption to do it, and in that scenario, they have to remain outside of the caregiving area, so they have to only work on the East Campus.
What other immunizations or vaccines are required of staff?
Influenza is the only one that's required by all staff. And then there are other immunizations that are required based on where you work and what your job is. So kitchen staff, for example, are required to have hepatitis A. Anybody who's working in a caregiving role has to have hepatitis B, or they have to decline it, but it's one or the other has to be there. Their Tdap, so their pertussis, so anybody who's in a patient-facing role has to have their pertussis. They're measles and mumps and rubella, so it's
Yeah.
mostly the measles part that we're looking for. They have to have
Is
that.
there an assumption that everybody has MMR, or do you check and make sure they have it, no matter how old it is?
So we don't check it. They are able to provide us documentation or confirmation that they've had both the doses of MMR, or they were born in a year prior to when it's necessary to have it, when you're considered immune based on the generation that you grew up in. With the recent measles outbreak in the school district adjacent to us, we did do a rapid assessment of all of our frontline care staff's current immunity status, because if somebody were to walk in the door with measles symptoms, you need to know who to put in the room with them. So that's the only scenario that we check immunity. Otherwise we don't. We use reporting. Any other questions? I'm gonna turn it over to you next.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Whitcup. Our next on the agenda is post-affiliation budget. We were hoping that Commissioner Sparkers would be here for the discussion, part 3. So,
Okay.
I turn it over to CFO Daniels.
Okay. All right, want to continue, this is session 3 of what does a potential budget look like for the district post-affiliation? And we will have, I am sure, a session 4 and probably a session 5. So maybe even a session 6. So the next slide. The blue boxes were what we discussed last time.
Right.
What are the functions, staff duties, staff required, staff qualifications? We touched on staff salaries, didn't come to an agreement. I have plugged in potential staff salaries into my budget. We talked about revenue. Now what we're going to talk about are, community service costs. You'll see the budget, I have none. We're going to need to peg that. Other operating costs, I put those in the budget. I'll show you sources and how I figured that out. Outsourced functions, audit type legal functions, staff salaries, and benefits for staff and commissioners. And the staff salaries includes the commissioner payments. And so what are our total costs? What does the profit and loss statement look like from an accounting standpoint? What you'll hear me say the word GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, so an income statement. And then what does cash balance look like? How much cash does the district accumulate? And just before I go to the next slide, which is a budget, remember, net income does not equal cash, because we have non-cash expenses on the profit and loss statement in depreciation, and we have expenses in bond principal payments that don't show up on the profit and loss statement. So I figured that in to say, what's our cash accumulation look like? How much money in the bank? Okay, so
Could you define community service?
that's kind of what you guys need to define. It's just, do we want to be involved in the community in projects, and would there be funds associated with that? Does the district want to have some type of a community service function that will cost money?
Does that include advertising, for example?
Yeah. That would be promotion, advertising. That's kind of, again, for you guys to define.
Thank you.
It's not a kind of a required operating. It's not like you need insurance or something like that. So
It's all those things, Commissioner Pollard, that you all have kind of tossed around about when you aren't in the business of operating a hospital and clinic. What kind of healthcare related services might you want to bring to the district residents?
yeah.
That's the community service.
Yeah, it's going to be a point of, I would imagine, a point of discussion among this group.
As
Right.
well as outsourced functions, isn't that right? The board will need to discuss whether these should be outsourced or done in-house.
Yeah, that's another point of discussion. That's why we're going to have a number of sessions on this.
Okay, sounds
Do you, would you recommend, since this is a post-affiliation, that this should have been established prior? And who is going to be assisting us? Is this something that, Steve, you would be able to assist, to get this all set up?
Through the development of this budget,
Right, right.
we will need this when we go, we will need a budget that we agree on when we go into negotiations with Overlake, because one of the, I'll talk about it now.
Yeah.
A couple of negotiating points are, okay, we're going to have, I've pegged about $6 million in the bank. What happens to that? Is that the district's unrestricted cash, or does that get restricted by some part of the agreement we have, the affiliation agreement? You know, does that go into a trust fund that would fund a walkaway if Overlake says, we can't do this anymore and we have to go back? How much of our excess tax revenue, when I say excess tax revenue, that's tax revenue that is above our tax-backed bond payments. So $600,000 and it grows. How much of that do we keep, or does some of that go into a trust fund? In this scenario, I haven't done any assumption that, my assumptions are we will have all the $6 million in cash, in our cash buildup, and none of the excess tax revenue goes into a trust fund. So you'll see a pretty good buildup of cash. So session 5 and 6 will probably be going through various scenarios showing, okay, if we fund a trust fund at various levels, what does that cash buildup look like? So that's
Okay.
more to come.
At our next work study session, so the one that occurs before the regular meeting, the one that we've termed affiliation work study session, so the one that's coming up on the 13th,
Yeah.
12th, 13th, whatever that date is. And that meeting will be talking about the trust fund. And so that's what we wanted these to be timed so that you could walk into that conversation with a view, just some general conceptual ideas of how much we need to make sure to retain for district functions and
Right.
district operation. And you'll find that we keep toggling back and forth between those two pieces of the conversation, like Steve was just saying, because one informs the other, and we don't want to wait until closer to affiliation before we
right.
start having this
That's
conversation.
why I'm asking this. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like Steve said, he's gonna be walking into this with some really, just kind of guesstimate numbers, you know, big numbers that aren't very detailed. We'll slowly work towards the detail.
Okay, work towards the detail,
4,
but
5, and
in
6.
steps, because to throw it all at everybody at once, we'd all go, "Oh, I'm not really sure," so, okay. Now, next, and we're on slide 2, the slide numbers are on the lower right-hand corner. They're very small, but I wanted to number them. And then recap of our previous session. What did we do in session 2? Okay, we went over the board duties post-affiliation. Won't go over them again, but this is the list we talked about, what's gonna have to happen. We looked at FTE, I mean employee requirements. We said, okay, we need a superintendent, qualifications, management experience, prefer MHA or an MBA, and then an administrative and finance manager, and now 5 years of accounting experience and an MBA or CPA experience would be preferred but not required. So, then the revenue, the money coming in will be the lease payment from the affiliate partner and tax revenue, we're gonna talk about it, greater than LTGO debt service. In other words, our payment on our tax-backed bond. So those are the revenue sources current we have. We will have. Okay, now this.
They'll have post-affiliation as
Yeah.
opposed to current, right?
Yeah.
Post-affiliation.
So, next slide, I have to remember, this is rather busy, so I'm going to go line by line and explain this, okay? We talked about, top line is tax levy, that's the tax revenue we have coming in. And I have grown that by 3% a year, which is pretty much historically what our tax revenue grows at. Then the next line is the lease payment to the district. This is the lease that Overlake will pay to the district. And that's our revenue bond debt service, 5% above our revenue bond debt service.
But it has nothing to say about our other debts, that is our revenue bonds.
We have debt, those payments coming into the profit and loss and cash statements. So we're still gonna have to pay, what's gonna happen is Overlake will pay us 5% above our revenue bond debt service. That's interest and principal. And we will then have to pay the bondholders.
Okay.
That's how that cash flows.
So now how does the LTGO mix with that? We're talking about the revenue bonds right now.
Right, with the LTGO, what we get is we get the tax revenue, and we have to pay the LTGO bondholders.
Okay, so that we pay them,
Uh-huh.
and then on top of it is the revenue bonds,
Mhm.
which they're going to fund at 5%, so.
They're going to, it's the lease payment.
Okay, the lease payment.
Yeah, that's why I call it lease payment to district.
Right.
And that 5% above the revenue bond debt service is a requirement in our revenue bond, what I call the bond covenants. So if we transfer the ownership of the facility, lease it, and the entity that we lease it to has an A bond rating, highest you can get, and or Overlake does, then they will owe us 5% above our revenue bond debt service in a lease payment. And the bondholders put that in, or we put it in, the bondholders accepted it, they put that in the bond covenants to protect themselves.
Sure.
They want to have a little cushion in there.
Okay, so if the LTGO bonds are being paid by taxes,
Mhm.
right? And the lease payment is going to take care of the revenue bonds,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We're in the clear.
We are, if that's all we do, but we have some expenses to run this place. And you'll see that we have cash buildup and we have a net income. So, yeah, we are in the clear. But what you have to figure is, okay, we've got some cost to operate. And so we have to somehow pay for those. And how do we pay for those? We pay for those out of the lease payment to the district above debt service, and we pay for the tax revenue above debt service. And the fact that, so that's how we pay for it.
Because there's still, even if you're at minimal function, just doing the bare minimum, there's still expenses associated with that. Just the surface water management, if nothing else, with the East Campus.
Let me go through, I've got expenses here.
Okay,
And
yeah,
then we're
yeah.
going through, that's the next,
Okay.
where it says
Yeah, that's-
expenses.
yeah.
Okay. Keep looking up that going, I'm not controlling that pointer.
Oh, do you want to?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so, administrator salary, and we had talked about that. It's an estimate I did, I estimated $100,000 a year. And how did I come up with that? We talked to a district up north that has this type of arrangement, but not nearly as complicated as our deal. And they pay their administrator about $75,000. I was talking to Keith Clevin, who talked to us with Piper Jaffrey, and he said, and I said, I'm kind of pegging that as a salary. He said, your deal is way more complicated than that. You need a higher level of expertise. So I put in $100,000 and grew that at 3% a year. That's just my estimate. I mean, this group will have to decide how much do we pay an administrator.
Do you use what is called the actuarial system?
Pardon me?
Actuarial, going increasing numbers every year.
Basically inflation, yeah. Increase it for inflation, yeah. And, generally, the increase in the consumer price index that we look at is about 2.5% to 3.5% a year, about 3%. If I could predict inflation, I would own my own island in the Mediterranean, and I can't.
You can.
No. Administrative and finance manager, 62,000, where I got that salary number from is, what does a fully qualified healthcare-based accountant, what do you pay? We have salary survey data, so I pegged that at 62,000. Again, grew it at 3% a year.
Could those two positions be combined, the administrator and administrative and finance manager? It looks to me like there might be some duplication.
Couple of thoughts, my thoughts on it, and they're just my thoughts, are if you have only one person, you haven't got segregation of duties. And you've got, about revenue of 7 to 8 million flowing through this place. And that, I think it would be, not saying you'd get somebody dishonest, but it would be not prudent to have
Yeah,
two people and someone looking over someone else's shoulder. Because, you, as the commissioners, are part-time, you're not there day to day. So to have two people, I think would make sense. My thoughts. And I'm just giving you my thoughts. Salary and benefits and taxes, I used our current tax rates and workers' comp rates and just carried them forward and increased them at 3%.
That is with two personnel, that is with two teachers.
With two people, yeah, two people. I got our tax rates from our accounting department. Then we've got commissioner salaries, just pay you guys the maximum for meetings. Commissioner benefits and taxes, again, used current health insurance rates and current tax rates for you guys, and got that number.
When you say you plugged in the maximum, I believe the state maximum's, I don't know, like 8,500, but we never do reach that number annually in terms of compensation.
I wanted a conservative budget, so I put in the maximum. For one thing, the thought on that is you're going to be kind of in charge of for lack of a better word, a startup organization.
Yeah.
Might require more meetings and more oversight and such. So that's why I did that. But a good question, and they're all good questions. So I don't want to come across as defending a decision because I realize this is just kind of my estimate. So do you have any other questions? I'm going to stop for a second. I tend to talk.
No, I think this is a good roadmap for us, post-affiliation, that at least we can see the numbers, we can ask the questions later.
Okay.
The harder questions later.
Okay,
But
thank
it's
you.
nice to have it drawn there and give us an idea of at least what we're looking at in terms of numbers
Okay.
for the next 5 years, or what is it, yeah.
Okay. Purchase services, legal cost. I kind of did an estimate on that, but there is enough complexity with the revenue bonds, the LTGO bonds, that there's going to be some need for legal service. And, you have meetings and such too. So, insurance, I asked our current broker to say, okay, what would be the insurance costs for an operation this size and one you've seen? And they said, well, about 20,000 or so.
When you say insurance, that's the DO.
That would be the property, liability, and directors and officers.
Okay.
Yeah, so a complete insurance
Yes.
package.
Okay, thank you.
I talked to, PSF is Parker Smith and Feek, who is our broker. I trust their judgment. Audit costs. An annual audit by Moss Adams, and I plugged in another 12,000 or so for quarterly reviews. Again, that control, oversight, with two people, you want to say, okay, I want to make sure all the cash is being handled properly, all the money that's coming through. You don't like to think it, but there are bad things that happen when you have a lot of cash and a small amount of people looking over it. So
The audit cost, does that include the state audit as well that we do every?
I mean, it's,
Is that
state audit is about every couple of years, and the
Yeah,
Moss
is
Adams
that
audit.
included on that number as well?
Yeah, I think
Is
that would
Moss-
cover
okay.
it. State audit will be far less complex because there are less policies and procedures and such. But the financial audit, I would leave with Moss Adams. They are, Moss Adams, no state auditors are here. Moss Adams has a higher level of comfort with complexity in the financial complexity than the state auditors do. State auditors are very good at what they do, but as far as a high level of complexity in the financial area, I think I had Moss Adams or someone like them would be who you'd want. Office rental, that's a 0. I said, okay, you probably use East Campus property. Surface water management fee, that's the tax no one gets out of. So, commissioner and staff travel, I just kind of pegged, you guys would probably want to go to a few meetings, and I looked at what you'd spent the prior years. Everybody goes to the Chelan and such, and you want to keep abreast of various, in healthcare and in the public sector, what's going on.
We haven't had any update on costs.
Utilities, I based that on the current East Campus and grew at 3%. Supplies, based that on what the administrative department spends on supplies. Remember, there are computers in there and such too, and you have IT costs and such. So it's more than just paper clips and pencils. It's, some computers, some electronic equipment and such, software probably. Depreciation. You guys still own the hospital, so you still incur a non-cash expense called depreciation, and that's part of a gap. So your total operating expense down here, interest on the revenue bonds, that's from the bond schedules, that's the interest payment, that gets recognized on a profit and loss statement. And interest on the LTGO, the tax-backed bonds, that gets recognized on a profit and loss statement. So your total expense, total interest expense, and your total expense, and you can see your first year on a GAAP basis, first couple of years you lose money, you still gain cash, but you lose money. So that's your bottom line on by generally accepted accounting principles. Now the next slide is going to say, okay, how much cash, money in the bank accumulates from this?
How does this compare with our current situation? The total expense is $8,107,000.
Our total expense, right, running a hospital is $38 million.
38.
Yeah.
Now, will Overlake get a copy of this?
Overlake will want to see it.
Can we see theirs?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I would assume we can. I'm not gonna answer for them, but I will guess that they won't keep it secret. Yeah.
Aren't there some gray areas where it could go to either one or the other?
Okay, we'll talk, kind of on the next slide, I'm gonna talk about gray areas and what I call points of negotiation.
Okay.
And I made some assumptions, but I think we're gonna have to talk a little bit about it. Debt service, principal payments on the revenue bonds and the LTGO bonds, those are off the debt schedule. So total principal payment. So the cash produced is your net income plus your total depreciation. That's the amount of cash that this budget produces each year. As you can see, you go from 360,000 to 575. That's because your tax revenue is going up and such. So, and the bond payments are relatively stable. Now here's a big, I didn't calculate, okay, what's the accumulated cash? started out with 6 million. So we keep pretty much all of our unrestricted cash. You know what restricted cash means? Unrestricted cash means it's not restricted by bond companies. It doesn't have to be held in trust by for our bondholders. This number right here is 6 million, is going to be a point of negotiation. How much does the district keep? How much goes into a trust fund? So we're going to talk next time about the trust fund. And that has a big impact, obviously, on the amount of cash buildup. The other point of contention will be how much of our tax revenue above debt service goes into a trust fund. And what I would propose is, as we continue this conversation, is that we'll talk about next time what a trust fund is. So you
Yeah,
kind of wrap your heads around that. Then the next would be, I take this budget and I run some scenarios and show what the effect of buildup on cash is. Because for a small business, and you guys are going to be a small business, cash is king. So at various levels of a percent of the 6 million going into a trust fund and a percent of the excess tax revenue or debt service going into a trust fund. So what does that look like? It'll help you, I'll just kind of have a table and show those two variables and what happens to cash. And it'll help us think about what's our negotiating standpoint as we look at how much goes into a trust fund.
So, question, on the trust fund, I know you're gonna explain it more in detail what trust fund is. Is this trust fund collectively part SB8 or over,
What a trust fund is,
The 6
I'll give you a
million
little
out of
bit,
that-
I'll give you kind of off the top of Steve's head, and don't write it down, but it's 87.2% maybe accurate, is a fund not held by Overlake, not held by the district, administered by a third party that neither party can access unless certain things happen. So you have an independent party. We use for our bonds, we use US Bank. We give money to US Bank, not us, not our bondholders, that is in a trust fund. And that trust fund is, in case we could not make revenue bond debt service, they can access, the bondholders have the ability to access that trust fund. So you're holding it in trust. You trust that they're going to keep it independent. And either party can access it if something happens. So the point is, how much money do you have in there? And what are the somethings that have to happen before it can be accessed?
Does this
Yeah,
replace our
yeah.
reserve fund?
No, we're still gonna have a bond reserve fund. But we're going to set up an additional, you can call it a reserve fund, a trust fund,
Yeah.
that, I'll kind of give you my thoughts, would say, let's say that 2025, when our revenue bonds are callable, Overlake just says, this is not working, we're walking away. District, you have a hospital to run. You're going, we don't have management in place, we've got to ramp up. This money would help do that. Let's say Overlake says, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. You guys say, this is the second greatest thing since sliced bread. And you say, okay, maybe Overlake can access some of it to build to do some capital improvements or some service improvements. So just those type of things. What has to happen? The trust fund is independent until something happens and someone can access it. Please ask
So
questions.
in the end, we will
Does
have
anybody have a
two trusts.
veto over, say, Overlake wants to do something, but we don't think it's a good idea? Do we have a veto over that?
That's a negotiating point.
Could we not, could the district not keep the entire 6 million and be accessible, you know?
That's a negotiating.
I don't think, yeah, well,
That's a
it
negotiating
gets
point.
so, yeah,
Yeah,
Point
they're
of-
all negotiating points.
okay,
Yeah.
But typically, they're pretty well-defined
Very
triggering
well.
events. If this event occurs,
right.
then ergo, it's written in a document, that you're allowed to access that fund. Let's say they have a poor year and they need to access some fund.
Yeah.
Or they want to use for capital expenditure, you own the building still, you're gonna invest the capital, you'll get a return and maybe higher lease rates. But you have to have a triggering events identified, so it's not like, well, let's just put our heads together and figure out what to do with that money.
There's no penalty if you withdraw from it.
Yeah, and,
Is that right?
You're not allowed to.
You're not, I mean, if you have to use it, when it triggers an event,
Yes.
you use it, you're withdrawing from it, there's no penalty
Correct,
regardless.
unless you later modify the agreement that changes triggering events.
Yes.
You're pretty much bound by what you agree it can be used for. Later, you may want to expand those reasons, but like Steve said, it's really negotiable. That's a
Yeah.
piece that is going to be a little harder
Point of contention
to
right
negotiate,
there.
just to figure out what a triggering event might be
Yeah.
for you or for overlay.
and,
I would approach it as a bone of contention.
Yeah.
I think both sides of us will see it as just as a way for each of us to have a comfort zone.
No,
yeah.
but they will have their own trust.
No,
but
it's a
It's
trust fund
combi-
that is between the two of us
That's
in
what
the
my
same way
Okay,
that we currently have a trust fund between us and our revenue bondholder.
yeah.
The trust fund lives between the two of us essentially.
Oh, okay.
This will be another trust fund that is between us and Overlake.
Yeah, and trust fund, it's a very complicated
Yeah.
document. You get to have attorneys interpret it for you. I will occasionally read the trust agreements for our bond documents, and, okay, you gotta read this sentence 3 times because I gotta figure out what it says. So, they're very complicated. They're
Yeah.
complicated for a reason, because they're very prescriptive on when it can be accessed and what the requirements are, and they should be. Little interpretation. So as you can see, under this scenario, you tap cash in the bank, unrestricted cash, and that presumes you don't fund anything else, you just fund what's in your profit and loss statement, goes from 6.3 million to 8.9 million. So that is a pretty good accumulation of cash. And also you say, okay, we got a lot of money in this place, maybe we do want to have some control in place. So, and again, that number will change as I change that number, and that number, keep looking, you're not looking where I'm looking at. As I change that 6 million, and as we change the amount of that excess tax revenue over LTGO bond debt service going into your bank account. Right now, it's all going into your bank account. Just down here, we have some bond covenant requirements that I've calculated. Days cash on hand, we're required to have 60 days worth of expenses. So, no problem with this scenario. And then a debt service coverage, how much above your debt service is your cash inflow? Has to be 1.2, and we're fine there. So, and then just down here, a reminder that we will still have that revenue bond reserve fund. It's in trustee, U.S. Bank, an independent party, of 3.675188. So 3.675 million, which is the maximum revenue bond debt service in any year. They wanted that amount of money guaranteed with a trustee. The bondholders can access if for some reason we couldn't make a debt service.
So that doesn't change.
No, that we cannot touch because it is in a trust account. Only to be accessed by the bondholders if we would not be able to make a bond payment
I mean, it
on our
doesn't
revenue
move with
bonds.
inflation or anything like that?
Nope.
Because.
That's because
does the interest
they
go?
put in the highest, that's the highest annual debt service we will ever have with the revenue bonds. It's
Okay.
3.675188. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there
Please ask
interest-
questions.
Yeah, is there
Question
interest
about
on that,
interest.
that 3.6 million, is there interest on that? Wouldn't that?
There's a little bit of interest that we bring into our operations.
Okay.
Not, believe me, it's not much.
All right.
Well, because they have to be very conservative with how they invest it. I
But
mean,
still,
it's-
for 3.5 million, there ought to be.
There's some.
Pretty good interest.
Yeah, there's some. It's not much money.
And that 3.5, the interest can be accessible,
Yes, it can.
right?
Yeah.
We bring it into operations.
We bring it up.
Right, to
Yeah.
the operations, yeah.
When we meet and negotiate with Overlake, who is actually physically in that meeting talking?
Right. I
Um,
didn't know that, too.
Yeah.
Steve and I and our attorney,
Our attorney.
Brian Bauer from Hull Render.
We have an attorney we've engaged for this project, who's very familiar with hospital affiliations.
And so you'll deliver the questions that we pose,
Absolutely.
so that, you know, you'll be, because we won't be able, we're not gonna be, I'll
I
be,
think he's gonna be
part
there in
of the-
June, right? You're gonna meet him next meeting,
oh, okay.
so, yeah.
Well, it's the
Brian's gonna
same
come for
firm
the
we've been
trust
dealing
fund
with, isn't it? Or
conversation.
is it?
Oh, okay.
Hall
I'm sorry.
render,
Yeah,
yeah.
Hall Render?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's
Uh-huh.
Hall Render?
Mhm.
Hall render's coming as well?
Yeah, no,
No.
Hall Render is Brian Bauer with Hall Render is coming, next
Oh.
meeting.
Was that what you said, Mr. Pollard?
So-
I just wanted to confirm that we're talking about Hall Render.
Right.
And you're talking about who's going to be negotiating for us, is that
Mhm.
correct?
Correct.
Mhm.
And, but what I hope we'll get around to at some point is the makeup of that combined board, what do you call that? There's a name for it. you know.
Nuco.
Pardon?
Nuco?
Nuco?
The new con?
Yeah,
Nuco.
yeah, no, there's gonna be a board, a NUCO board, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
And I'd like to see us at some point discuss what will be the makeup of that board.
Right.
It's probably a point of negotiation too. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know, I
well-
don't know. You know, I don't, Gene, I'm gonna take that back.
Yeah,
Because what we are doing is, again, my thoughts, we are, for the lease payment, we are letting Overlake run the hospital. NUCO's purpose is to run the hospital. The district does, commissioners do not run the hospital anymore. So I would, I'm gonna take that back, probably we will not, we, as this group of commissioners, will not have representation on NUCO's board.
well, I read something in state law, and maybe Skip can comment on that, and that is that if there is this kind of a combination, that we have to be represented on that board.
That one I
And
don't
it
know.
can be commissioners. I'll see if I can find that citation for you.
Okay.
But we have to be represented on that board.
Yeah, if I remember, there is that when you are in the acquisition or well, we're not selling, but that the board has to be represented as well, because that's our fiduciary duty, to know what, you know, what we're getting at, and to be, you know, rather than having, so that's.
I'm not the attorney, so you're gonna have your general counsel.
Right,
And
so
we can
maybe
talk
legal
about-
counsel
We
help.
We can talk about
Yeah.
this in more detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be very.
You've got way
important.
beyond my
Really-
expertise, and
I think it's really
and
important.
unfortunately I have opinions on it, so I might say something wrong.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we make sure
Yes.
everybody
Yes.
understands the structure of the engagement that's being considered.
Mm.
Okay.
Mr. Pollard, remember there in the LOI that there is the stated intention of delivering quality and financial information on a regular basis from NUCO into this board, so that from the beginning, we made sure that that communication was recognized.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and, but I'm thinking of a RCW that refers to when there is going to be a kind of merger or affiliation,
Right.
that we have to be a party to that and have representatives on the combined board, or whatever board is
Yeah,
established
is that-
for this new organization.
If
That's
that
my
was-
recollection.
Well, if that would be hospital districts that merged, you would, but under this arrangement,
This is a lease.
under an affiliation, you in essence are handing off that operation. So I don't think you have to have representation, I don't think it's
Okay,
your
I'll try to
statutory
find the
requirement.
citation.
And I'm looking through it now, but I don't think so.
So,
But-
we need more legal research.
Yeah, we'll-
on it.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll get it
I-
confirmed.
That's a good
I remember
question.
there's, okay, yeah, I'll have to look at that as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
it's a nice definite maybe. Any questions, comments, anything like
What are your personal plans? Are you gonna stay around and be able to monitor this and
that? I am
administer?
going to retire.
Well, we knew that you wanted to, but you said something about going half-time. And can you continue to work with us on this?
I will continue to work with you on
So the-
this project, we've been on my main projects, until we get a deal done, so through the end of the year.
Yeah.
And then after we get a deal done, that other person that we've.
Probably you're gonna have to hire somebody, you have to figure out what staffing you need and resources you need.
Gosh, I hate to see you go as long as you're, part
Take lots
of
of-
the construction of this complicated system.
My family's already making fun of me, so they really make fun of me.
Okay.
Thank
all
you very
right.
much.
Well,
Okay, sorry about that. So we're gonna skip number 3, which is the legislative update, because there is no
There is no update to share.
no
Right.
update to share. So number 4, rescheduling our July work study. The alternative date is Wednesday, July 31st. And then we have, the last one is our 2018 annual report discussion. We have
This was,
Dr. Whitcup.
sure, where is it?
Madam President, weren't there some legislative updates that we should be familiar with? For example, HBS 1607, I think.
Or the bill?
Was signed by the governor.
Yeah, it's not that there's no updates, it's what we were waiting for was Wisha to put that annual summary out, and then we could go through that annual summary together. And
Yeah, we should.
usually it's done by about now, but I think the session was just, they were going full steam until the last day. So it'll probably come in tomorrow's email.
We'll include it in our.
Murphy's Law.
We'll probably include it in our board meeting.
Yeah, it's something to
Yeah.
have it so we can go
Hopefully.
to Chelan having already discussed it.
Yes.
I think I just
Okay.
got it from Risha, but that's all right.
Oh, I didn't, so we
All
can
right.
prepare for it.
Okay, so Dr. Whitcup. And
What's going on here? So the
And
very
then-
last thing is, I had given you the annual report, a couple of work
Evaluation.
studies ago.
yes,
And then you had asked for an opportunity to review it and then come back and discuss it at this work study. So I just wanted to honor that. And so I got it up there and you've got a new copy in your hand. And it's a multi-page document, so probably not great use of our time to go through in detail, but I'm happy to go through it in whatever detail you want.
Short narrative. Yeah.
This is a rather long document. Maybe we
Oh,
can take
we
this
can-
home and study.
Be a good bedtime
You
reading.
sure can. This is a document that you were given a couple, 3 months ago.
The same document.
Same one.
yeah.
Okay, I
yeah.
apologize.
That's not a problem.
Yeah.
I just, you had asked to bring it back to a work study
Yeah,
session.
this is great.
So if you would prefer, just have your opportunity to read it and we can bring
Yeah.
questions informally, offline, that's totally fine too. I was just honoring the request.
Well, commissioners, what do you could just take it
Are
and
there-
if
We
you
can
are
just
there
do a
any
quick-
Yeah, just a
We
specific
can
quick-
just do a quick survey
Direct
through it
narrow-
if
yeah.
you want
Yeah, that
as
would
well.
be great, just
Are
don't.
there specific items that you think you should bring to our attention?
This is a summary of all the things that we lived in 2018. This is all the things that were coming to you on a regular basis anyway, so there should be no surprises. It just becomes a different view. You see it all together, is all it serves. This is a requirement of the Critical Access Hospital Program, is that you do an annual report, and the intention of it is that you do it and learn from it.
Yes.
And so it's a summary of, so you see here in the beginning that you talk about utilization, how many patients did we see, in what ways did we see them, and how did that change from the prior year. Rolls on, then it's just some conversation included in here. So for example, there's a conversation about our MRI, that we were ready to have growth numbers, but we had a lot of mechanical issues with the unit itself. And so we had a lot of offline days that cut into any of our growth. A summary of the staffing plan, how it was that we set our business operations up over the course of the year. In regard to the summary of quality improvement. Now, on your table, can I reach across this little green brochure? This is our
Newsletter.
our kind of quarterly, it's
That's
probably
nice.
every 4 or 5 months that we get this put out. And again, this is done just to keep
Just in-house.
quality, it's in-house, it's just to keep quality in front of our staff. And so just putting it in your hands. So 74 department level QI projects were conducted in addition to all of the multi-departments like the Claudie program that we talked about earlier. We also work with other groups on quality improvement, and a lot of collaboration. So here's Overlake, we work with them on a STEMI project. We work on hospital-acquired infections through NHSN, that should be NHSN. reporting. That's a national CDC subsidiary there. The Partnership for Patients program, which is the displays that we looked through earlier today. And so a summary of all of those things that we do. We also do internal audits and internal reviews. Again, the Compliance Committee brings those reports to you, so Steve brings that on a quarterly basis. And so this, again, is a summary statement about that and all the different ways that we do audit. We do nurse-to-nurse audit. We do provider audit one another's charts. We have external auditors come in and do both documentation as well as coding audits as part of our compliance process on here. And then just some of the high-level issues, high-level projects that we work on. So Med-Surg, we do an auditing around barcode scanning for medication administration. It's not just about billing, it's also about compliance with process. We were asking about restraints earlier, Emma. And so in the emergency department is the one place where you might have to use restraints because for the safety of the staff and the safety of the patient until you can transition them to a more appropriate environment. So we do a lot of audit restraining. Because trauma designation was new to us in the course of, all of 2018 was our first full year as a trauma designation. We continue to do 100% of trauma activation reviews there. Infection prevention is another area that we continue to pay a close attention to. We've already had a lot of conversation about the CAUTIs, which were here, but we have all cultures are reviewed. Our infection preventionist lays eyes on everyone and follow up on the treatment plans, and then all patients on isolation and multi-drug resistant organisms. So I apologize, there's house lingo in here because this is intended, the audience that is intended for.
Acronyms there.
Yeah, exactly. And a summary of some of the new things that we started in 2018, the 340B program, you're aware of. We had our 2 clinics were certified as rural health clinics, and a telescope program started with the University of Washington Harborview. Those were probably our 3 biggest projects in the course of the year and things that we implemented. We did transition our primary method of procedural sedation from one that is a combination of, this is fentanyl and Versed were the 2 products that we were using, and we transitioned to propofol as our primary usage. Again, that has allowed us for the patients to have the better experience. We have a faster turnover rate. Patients recover faster. It took a while because the propofol has a different teaching profile, so we had to get everybody up competency verified on that.
I feel the need for a PR function in the district because many of the things that you've illustrated here are very positive, and the community should know about them. There are others that maybe we should admit as problems and so on. But the problem is that the Valley Record is not covering us. The Valley Record transitioned to a regional newspaper, and you're just as likely to get a piece of national news as you are a piece of local news. So it seems to me like we need to think about how we can get good news out there in the public, more information about the hospital. For a lot of people in the district, we've been forgotten. And we've got to put the name of this hospital in their foreheads, right up front. Because right now, we've disappeared from the scene. We get no newspaper coverage. There hasn't been an article in the Valley Record about the hospital in 6-8 months, a year, so I think we could do better.
So that's exactly why we've launched the social media campaign. So I've been bringing those reports to you so you can see the number of viewing that we've been doing for the increasing. That is just the tip of the iceberg because the social media is done by a local duo who, in addition to doing our social media, are actually our ambassadors and our spokespeople out in the community. And so when they meet with me, these are all the things that they get downloaded about. We take a department or a service line at a time, bring them up to speed, and then that becomes their focus of when they're out talking, when they're doing the social media campaigns, that becomes the theme. So we have themes through each month. And these also become our focus areas when we go out. We have 6 community big affairs over the course of June and July. So we go out and do either first aid or a booth at an event. You know, summer is when everybody comes out of their house and starts
So
gathering
does our
together.
social media team connects with the local newspaper as well, so that whatever they discover, their discovery of what the good things that we do here is presented to them and is written up in a paper, more of the local paper. I
When-
think that's what
when you
Commissioner
can-
Pollard is wanting to look at in terms of
Yeah.
reaching out to
So we
the
can't-
local publishers as well.
Well, so we can't have a lot to do with what the editor decides to print.
Yeah, but,
Whereas we can have control of these other things,
Yeah,
but we
yeah.
still advertise in the Valley Record. We still send them, press releases when there's something to send press releases to. We still speak with them. We still engage with them when we're at the community events. When I'm at the chamber every month,
okay.
you know,
Yeah.
usually the Valley Record isn't there, but on occasion they are, and it's a great opportunity to
Yeah, we
chit
used to
chat
have the
with them.
Valley Record come here and take, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, he.
maybe that's
There's a
something
new
we need
editor
to, yeah,
promoted.
you got promoted and left the area.
Yeah.
There's a new editor to the Valley Record now, this guy Corey, whose last name escapes me. But he has had like community events in downtown Snoqualmie at the Black Dog Coffee House.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And he's
that.
done it at least once. I know he has at least one more
Yeah.
coming up where he's doing sit-downs and people can just come say, you know, what they're interested in hearing.
Yeah, and we can also
And
reach out
he has
to
reacted to that,
Living
like I've seen some
Snoqualmie.
changes.
Living in Snoqualmie would be a great, yeah,
That's
that's
a
the
good
We're
person.
regularly.
Yeah, regularly,
dropping
yeah.
stuff on
And
Dana.
that's-
Because
yeah.
these are two very distinct demographics that you're hitting, the social media crowd versus the newspaper reading
Yeah.
crowd. And I think it's important that we reach out to them both, because currently we're more of a newspaper reading crowd, right, that we see in the patient population here. But we're looking to get more of the social media crowd, so
Yeah.
I think
Need to find that
Girl.
balance.
outreach
so
to
where we
both,
can
I
do
think,
it.
would be important.
Okay, wonderful. I'll continue, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. And yeah, part of that is driven by, you know, the amount of money that was offered up in the budget for this
Right.
year
Yeah.
for marketing. And so we'll work with what we have and then grow it a little more into the next year.
There are, you know, the Yahoo sites, North Bend and Snoqualmie, Yahoo sites particularly. The Fall City Yahoo site says, we don't want to hear about anything controversial, but they will let you put announcements in there. So these Yahoo sites have pretty good circulation, maybe like 700 to 1,000 each. And then there is the Living Snoqualmie blog. It's they have about circulation of about 7,500. They're very good, but you know, you got to realize that there are a lot of folks like me that are not on Facebook and they're not on a lot of these social sites. And it gratified me to be walking by the post office and see a newspaper with something about Snoqualmie Valley Hospital on the front page that I can see. It just seems like we're out of sight, out of mind for a lot of people. That's what I'm concerned about.
So, and we're in Living Snoqualmie. We're regularly giving Dana contributions.
Yeah, Dana, okay, wonderful.
Yep. And then the annual report also talks about what's the future plans, how do you go into 2019? So some of these you're already aware about, establishing a sleep lab, the RQI, which is our continuous certification process, growing acute admission volumes. Again, that the first directive on our strategic plan is just becoming less and less dependent on our swing bed program. Increasing engagement in our community, which is the point that Commissioner Pollard was just bringing up, and then telemedicine in here, and then improvement in employee satisfaction, and that is already well on the way.
I would like those things to be brought to the board to see if we have agreement about those plans that are developed at the staff level.
These are all the things that we've been bringing through. Like I said, a lot of these you already know about, because we've been talking
Yes, it's
through
just
them.
summarizing them, like the sleep lab, we talked about it last week, in our board meeting, yeah. more.
I don't think there was proper discussion of the sleep lab, and it was just announced that it would be opening in June, and the board never considered the profit loss angle on it, whether it's really needed. And then, of course, one of the things that's really needed is the requirement under the ACA for a community health needs study. And it's, right now, it's overdue. And once you have your community health needs study, you can go from there to developing these programs. But we need to have that study done, and it's required by law.
Okay, let's see. That would be included in the goals and plans, I guess. Yeah. That would be included,
All right.
yeah.
This isn't happy, so we'll come back and do it later. Okay.
Smart.
No,
Are you
no,
building a
that's good.
similar list of goals for 2020, or is that kind of going to be up in the air with the affiliation?
That'll have to be in the air.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
we'll wait too.
here we are in the end of May and with so much in front of us with affiliation. So we'll have to wait until we get deeper into the year to have a better understanding of what does, the 12 months that follow that point look like.
Okay, do we have,
That's it.
okay, are there any more questions? Okay, hearing none, do you have a public comment? Open.
My name is, for the record, my name is Scott Scowcroft from West Seattle. First of all, congratulations, Commissioner Carter. Glad to see you're there. And you have an opportunity to be the ambassador for the commissioners and for the hospital district, bringing your enthusiasm and your knowledge about social media and the rest of your background. So look forward to seeing what you'll be doing for the balance of your appointment and then the beginning of your new term come next year. And speaking of social media, I have to go back to my website, SVH Forum, to update one of the pages that's called Social Media. It was an editorial comment that I had made encouraging the district to go to Facebook, to go to other forums on social media, because that's where you can really connect with the community. And that's exactly what the hospital district has done recently. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes traction of maybe 6 months, could be more, before you get real traction in social media, because you're inviting people to trust you, and they'll only do that if you're there and you're consistent and you've been able to prove yourself. So keep up the good work with that. One of the things that I would say is that this board, or certain members of this board, decided that marketing was not a good idea and took away from the district the ability to connect with the community by taking out the marketing budget rather than evaluating what was needed and appropriating what I would think would be an appropriate amount of money. So if you're not happy with where you are right now in terms of community connectedness, there might be a correlation between your decisions that you made previously and where the district is right now. I noticed, and I guess I've got one more thing to say, and that is that when you have an affiliation with Overlake, one way to frame it in your mind is that that is a lateral, that's neutral. Right now you have a hospital that has great medical excellence that is connected to the community, and your job is to negotiate something that is a lateral over to Overlake so that they will be able to continue the great tradition that Dr. Whitcop and the teams that she's been on has been able to establish in these last 12 or 14 years. So where is the value added? If you did nothing except that, that would be fine. But the value added is this line here that says program costs. It's 0 and you have not discussed. So I would say that it's what can you do in addition to affiliating with Overlake to benefit the Valley? And the first thing that you need is to have a vision. What vision do you have that would make in 5 and 10 and 20 years and 1 and 2 and multiple generations beyond that, what would make a really great difference? Once you have a vision, then what are the creative ways that you can come up with in negotiating to underwrite the funding for that? Maybe it's 6% rather than 5% over, the lease over debt, and let that surplus 1% go into them. Maybe there are grant writing opportunities that you think, well, we'll have enough going here that we can underwrite the cost for grant writing. It's up to you to come up with it, but you need to be, I would say, positive about the hospital district and positive about the future, and have a board that works together with one voice under the leadership of Darielle and with the consensus that you're capable of if you'll only agree to work together in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scowcroft. Thank you for mentioning about your social media, because I was going to ask about how many hits you have on that when you're posting our, as you
We're
mentioned.
not supposed
you
to,
got-
point of order, Madam President, we're not supposed to engage in discussion with.
But thank
We'll
you for,
talk later about
yeah,
that.
thank you for bringing it up. Appreciate it. Okay. Our upcoming board meetings, affiliation work study will take place Thursday, June 13, 4:30. This time it's 4:30 to 6, East-West Conference Room. Regular business meeting Thursday, June 13, 2019, same 6:30 p.m. North-South Conference Room. And then we will not have a work study in June, no meeting in June, due to Chelan Rural Hospital Leadership Conference. Do I hear any other comments? No more? Do I hear
Well,
an
I
adjournment?
guess I don't understand why we can't have a work study session in late June, because the Chelan conference is in early June. And the one year, we even held a board meeting at the Chelan conference, remember? That was in 2000.
Maybe that's something to be considered, but it's it's been a tradition that when we have the Chelan Rural Hospital, that serves as our board, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it serves as that. So it's been, at least in the last 3 years that I've been here, whenever we have the June Chelan conference, there is no board meeting at all for that month of June.
Well, I know that.
In lieu of our,
We
in lieu
held the
of this.
board meeting at Chelan, so it was.
That is something that the executive,
It's
CEO
our-
can decide on.
Yeah, it's our work study session that is in conflict. So are you proposing that we do the work study in Chelan?
Originally, when we came up with the concept of the work study program, we said we were going to use it for educational purposes.
Yes, I
And it
remember
would
that.
seem to me like there's space in June, despite Chelan, in late June, for a work study session where we pick an educational topic. Because the healthcare field is moving so quickly that we need to stay up with it with educational discussions. So I don't know if you can see a way clear to schedule us and check with the other commissioners, and maybe we can still have a work study session during that month.
We'll,
I don't recall we have work study every June. I know we established that work study. It's something that I made a motion 3 years ago, but I don't recall having a work study during the month when we are at the Lake Chelan Rural Conference. We were talking, I was more referring to our regular business meeting.
Yes, right.
That's what I
Actually,
was referring to, that we don't have that, but we do have it June 13.
Work study.
it's just the
okay.
second work.
It's just the second work study, so we have the first
This work
one,
study.
yeah. So that's something that the commissioners can discuss with our CEO here.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe when Daryl gets back?
Yeah, when she comes back.
So, I see, so you've made a differentiation between affiliation work study and work study.
Correct.
So, our work study session is really scheduled for June the 13th, and that's fine. And so what you meant was a general work study session will not be held that month.
Correct.
I think that's fine.
Which is the one where we tend to do education at, and
That's right.
that week at Chelan is full of education.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we won't make any more comments because we don't have comments here. So I'm calling One would like to make a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
Before you vote,
Okay.
just before you vote, did we, the
Reschedule, I
reschedule?
did read it.
Okay, is
The-
it
For,
any issues with that?
are there any issues, by the way, that's right.
It's okay with me.
Would you
It's
repeat
okay.
that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear. you.
Item number 4 on the topics of discussion, reschedule July work study for next month, the following month after June. There's an alternative date, which is Wednesday, July 31st. Any issues with it?
No, I'm just curious, why are we moving that?
I have a vacation planned.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very important.
Thank you, my
Yes,
husband will
yeah.
appreciate that.
Okay,
Okay.
so do we need a motion on that?
I think in
Do we
times
have to-
past, we've
do
just
we
said
have-
that it was an opportunity
it's
for
an-
everybody to confer that there was no conflict and that we can do it as an administrative issue.
Okay.
There was no
and
issue when I
actually,
read
that
it,
can-
so.
Right.
That can go on our regular meeting agenda of that rescheduling. Is that correct? We won't
Okay.
take any action tonight. All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
there is a motion and there's a
They can't
second.
vote. They can't
I call the
They
meeting
can.
adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
They did it.